Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hello there. Happy Friday to everyone. So glad to be here with you. And I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds to make sure they're logged in while I turn all of my electronic devices off. Um, I'm glad to be with you. I hope you're having a good day. Right before I went on, I realized I was missing a plug for my speaker, and I think it's a conspiracy that we have so many different cords for every single little device. I don't know why we cannot have a universal plug for all of our devices. I wanted to also tell you all about these glasses. So I know they just look like a normal pair of glasses, and I'll take them off in a second because there's a glare. But y'all, I bought these glasses yesterday, which I know this isn't expected in our Facebook Live, but I'm so excited because I had some friends tell me about the blue blocking light glasses, and you can get them on Amazon. Just look up blue blocking light glasses. Maybe another way to look them up. But it blocks the blue light that comes from your computer screens and your devices. And the second I put them on, it was like someone had just put this calm over my whole body. It really works. These were only like $15, $17. And I've worn them since yesterday, and I feel so much better. I'm one of those people that I spend a lot of time on the computer and I get a lot of headaches. And it felt so good. It's like you can feel it instantly. And so I wanted to give a shout out and tell you all, you got to go find you some of these glasses if you're going to be on your screen a lot. But I'll take mine off so I can not have a glare. So thanks for being here. We'll jump right into our topic. I have some notes because I wanted to make sure and go over a few things that was important to me to talk about. So me and Stacy, once again, we're so excited about our launch coming up soon. Next week, we're going to start showing you a preview of our exciting product and the subscription, Fundamentals for Kids. We're getting a lot closer to the launch date of February 1st. And so we're looking forward to sharing that with you. And as I talk to parents, one of the comments I get fairly often is parents will go, Monica, like, I can't change now what I've been doing. I've been parenting my children the same way for so long. I can't change now. We've kind of touched on this before. And because a lot of parents, it sounds like so much effort, like it takes a lot of effort to change the way you're doing things. And I guess I'm one of those people, I'm always trying to figure out a better way, a faster way, a more efficient way to do things. Anything that helps ease my life, I'm all in. Whatever it is. If there's a new device I can buy that carves off 30 minutes of my time every week that I have to do something that I could do in 30 minutes less time, I'm going to buy it. I don't care how much it costs. I'm going to figure out ways to make the things and my responsibilities more efficient so I can spend more time doing the things that I really want to do, which is play and hang out with my family and exercise and just have fun because I like to have a lot of fun. And so that's how I look at learning new parenting skills. I mean, are we crazy? You would not want to learn a better, more efficient way or a more productive way or a more positive way to parent by making just little changes in how we speak or how we teach. I get a lot of schools. We go into schools and I get teachers that go, Monica, we've got to somehow figure out how to get our school to approve your program because I spend so much of the day correcting children, fixing things, changing children's behavior from A to B. I do so many things that take away from our academic study, so many social issues and social problems between children. And she's like, if we could just, this is a typical conversation, but one teacher's like, if we could just focus on teaching our children the basic skills of manners, it would carve out so much of the corrections I have to spend during my day. And that's what I want you to think about, parents. I just want you to think about yesterday, okay? If you've got little kids, however old your kids are, how much of the day yesterday, or how many times did you find yourself correcting your children? And that's part of parenting, but how many times was it yesterday? And do you ever find that you're correcting your children for the same things over and over and over again? Like it always kind of goes back to the same problems. And what if we parented in a way and we tried just some new techniques and just see if the new techniques would work and would cut down on the amount of time we have to spend correcting? One of the reasons we want to look for different ways to parent that cuts down on correcting is because that is the basis of what helps us to have a better relationship with our children. You know, whether your kids are 3 years old or 13 years old, when they're being corrected, it doesn't feel good, right? And it's hard when mom or dad are in this correcting mode. I mean, typically when we're correcting, it's hard to be just all cheery and happy and rainbows and lollipops, right? Because something has happened that's kind of ruffled us, ruffled our feathers, or we see our child doing something that's not appropriate and we go into correcting. And I would imagine that if we were to ask your children or my children, when you are being corrected, is that typically, a negative experience, a positive experience? And that would play a role into how we might want to consider moving forward. It doesn't take a lot to build up these little bitty, let's call them bricks. It doesn't take much to build up little bricks of resentment that, if we're not careful, can build up an entire wall of resentment. Sometimes we wonder, why is it when our kids get a little older and become teenagers, sometimes this wall is formed? And yes, it's called hormones. It's called children becoming more independent. It's called children having their own thought processes. But sometimes I wonder if it's also this time that goes by as we're raising our children, where little seeds of resentment have been planted and have not been properly addressed. And after years of that, this little wall of resentment starts. So parents, what we're going to talk about today, I'm just going to give you some examples just to teach you the principle of trying to think more positively when we interact with our children. Please know, let me just say this before I go through these examples. I am not trying to suggest that we don't hold our children accountable for bad behavior. I'm not suggesting that there are not consequences when our children willfully disobey. And I'm not suggesting that we're trying to make life just easy and no sacrifice on our children's part. That's the opposite of what I'm talking about. But I believe that there's a way that we can help our children to have a desire to want to please us. I believe there's a way to help our children to want to make more positive choices, because that's how they feel better about themselves. And so as parents, we try to create an environment in our home that encourages our children to want to strive to improve and to make good choices. And that has everything to do with the respect that they have for you and I. For about 5 years, I was a youth leader in my church. And because I was a mom at the time, or I was always a mom, but I had kids at home and I was really focused on trying to raise these kids. I was always so intrigued by the kids that, I'm not saying any of them were perfect, y'all, but the kids that just seemed to really have it together, or the kids that just seemed to really want, and they had a strong desire to kind of stay on the path and to do their best to make good choices. And so I would often ask them questions like, why do you think you have such a desire to strive to make good choices? Why do you have a desire to stay on the path? Why is that important to you? And so often I was always so intrigued by, so often it would boil down to the kids, the child, the teenager's relationship with their parents, with one or both parents. Because they would say things like, well, I would never want to do anything to hurt my parents, or my brother and sister put my parents through so much. I just don't want to cause pain to my parents. Or, I just want to please them. It just, so often it was tied up in their relationship with their parents. And that kind of scared me, because I thought, gosh, it seems like that so much of why a child chooses what they do is tied up in how secure and loving their relationship is with their parents. And parents, I know that that's true. I know that that's the basis for having healthy relationships with our children that last a lifetime, that go into adulthood, is when we work really hard to have a positive relationship with them. And the thing is, parents, that's very difficult to have a positive relationship with our kids if we're always being negative. So let me give you some examples with that thought process in mind. So this is very typical. Let's say you're in the kitchen and you're cooking dinner and you need your son to come set the table. So you're like, hey, son, would you come in here and set the table? And your son is like, Mom, I'm watching my show. Get someone else to do it. Can't my sister do it? And you really need help. You're trying to rush dinner. Scouts are tonight. Y'all are going to be late. And you're like, no, turn the TV off and do what I said and get in here and set the table. Does that sound familiar? Sounds like I've done that before, doesn't it? And the thing is so maybe then your son, gets up, puts the TV off, and comes in, and you can just tell he's angry because he's making a lot of noise while he's setting the table. And so there's this negative interaction. Now, we could go through, and it's kind of a whole nother topic about helping our children to learn to obey first request and being respectful in how they speak to us. And that's a whole nother topic, but it's all related. But so let me ask another way that we could have approached this situation. Knowing that that's a need in our home, someone to set the table each night. Maybe at the beginning of each week, maybe on Sundays when your family has a family meeting, which is another podcast and another topic, Facebook Live. But you go ahead and give out assignments for this week's chores. And so maybe on Sunday, you already told that son, hey, son, you've got setting the table this week. And I need you to have the table set every night except Wednesday. We won't be home for dinner. But every night other than Wednesday, I need you to have the table set by 5 o'clock. I don't care when you do it during the day, but it needs to be set by 5. And you've already kind of established what happens, a consequence when those expectations aren't met. So anytime that you can kind of give your kids some freedom, give them some decision making, when it comes to things that we want them to do, where you can give them some ownership and let them make decisions, parents, it's always going to go better. So, for instance, none of us, even you and me, we wouldn't like it if just someone said, hey, can you come here right now and give me this? We do, and that's what we do for our family, but it just feels better when we get to decide when we do things. And so maybe that son is going to come home right after school and set the dinner table at 3 o'clock before he turns his afternoon show on. Or maybe when there's an advertisement during his favorite show, he's going to run in and set the table. That would be such a more positive experience, and then your son can feel good about them fulfilling their responsibility, and they can feel good about that you didn't have to remind them that they did it on their own because they knew that was their assignment this week. And I know you might be going, well, what if they forget? Well, that's another, if they forget, if they don't meet your requests and fulfill their responsibility, well, there's a consequence for that. I don't know what the consequence would be. Maybe the consequence is if the dinner is not set by 5 o'clock, then you're actually going to clear the table and wash the dishes that night. Whereas normally that's another child's responsibility. So you can do things like that. I don't like always dangling consequences in front of my children, but there is consequences for not obeying mom and dad. So just think about the responsibilities that you want your children to have each week. And if we could talk about those ahead of time and lay out the expectations, and then let your children have a little decision making on exactly when they complete each task, when possible. Okay, another scenario. Let's see. Let me go to my little chart here. Oh, so I know this happens too in a lot of families. So you've got an older sibling and a younger sibling, and there's some kind of dispute between them. And the older sibling, you witness the older sibling shoving, pushing their little sibling. You know, maybe a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old. And you watch the 10-year-old shove a 4-year-old. And you're immediately angry. And you come up to that child and you're like, why did you just do that? You're twice his size. You could really hurt him. You are not allowed to put your hands on that child. Now, I know that there might be a time that you actually do have to react that way. But what I know is that if we're not careful, that's a good way to actually build up the resentment that our older child has for their younger sibling. It's already hard enough, as you parents know. You know, older siblings struggle with patience and struggle with just getting along sometimes with their younger siblings, because their younger siblings drive them crazy because they want to play with their stuff and they break their stuff and they're always annoying them. And so it's just part of that conflict with being older versus the younger siblings. So I'm not saying we're making excuses or that there wouldn't be consequences for that older child shoving a younger brother. I'm not. But parents, what I want you to consider is, in that situation, how could you discuss and handle that situation in a positive way without you raising your voice, without you speaking in a condescending tone, without you causing or contributing to that older sibling being even more mad than they were when it first happened. And so a suggestion might be that you would call that older child aside and say, I see that you got really frustrated with your little brother. Do you want to tell me what happened? Do you want to tell me what led to you being so frustrated? Do you feel good about how you reacted to him? When your little brother thinks about you, what do you hope he thinks about? And once again, asking those questions does not mean that we don't hold our older child accountable for their action. But parents, it's always going to be better when we try to understand why our children react the way they do. When we show them that we actually do care that they get really frustrated, and that we do care if they're upset, whether they're angry or sad or scared, but we do care about that, and it does concern us, and it's something that we want to learn about and find out about. That's what helps build this trusting relationship between our children and us, is when we act like we care versus that we're just frustrated with their bad choices. I know that we know they're going to make bad choices. They're learning what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. It's called growing up, and it's called parenting as we try to teach them that. But I have found in my experience that the more empathy, not excuses, but the more empathy I can show my children when they're struggling, the better the teaching moment becomes, where we're able to discuss things and make progress. So sometimes it's just a quick one, how can I handle this in a positive way? How can I speak to my child in a soft voice and a soft tone so that our child is not so defensive and so that our child is more willing to listen? Okay, so here's another scenario that happens all the time, and yeah, it would make too. But you're in a so sometimes you don't even go in the store with your kids. You can't take it. You can't take them asking mercy. And I'll tell you something. We've gotten way out of control. I might have mentioned this in another live. I don't remember, but I went to a dollar store not too long ago, and I walked in, and I literally thought something had happened. Like I thought something had gone wrong because the store was such a mess. I mean, there were things all over the floor. Just, it looked like a tornado had been through the store. And I went up to the clerk and I go, what has happened? What's the deal? And she's like, oh, nothing's happened. Honey, this is called parents today allowing their kids to be wild. And I was like, wow, really? Are you serious? She's like, oh, honey, parents just come in here and just let their kids run wild. And they don't even, kids are opening boxes and opening things, and parents don't even care. And it's a different state we're living in. But I know sometimes taking our kids into the store can be frustrating because our kids are wanting to ask for things. So your child comes up to you, is like, Mom, can I have this? They pick up a thing of chewing gum, or pick up a bag of candy, and you're like, no, I told you, no more sugar today. Stop asking for things. Just come, stay with me. And you're just frustrated, and there's been this negative interaction between you and your child. And we all get it. But what if, so the thing in parenting is we try to recognize patterns in behavior, because whenever we see a pattern in behavior that we don't like, that's not good or not fun for us to go through, that's when we want to think to ourselves, is there another way that I could do this, that I could handle this, that wouldn't be so negative? And so let's say we have this issue with our child always asking for things when we go to the store. So that's when we're going to sit down with our kids. And we're going to go, okay, kids, from now on, you're going to get $5 a week allowance. And I know there's controversy about, do you give allowance or do you not? Whatever. I like giving allowance because at some point, your kids have got to learn how to manage money. And the sooner they start learning how to manage money and how to be responsible for money, the better. So at some point, I think they're going to have to be given a little money to start learning about it. But nevertheless, whatever you decide, let's just say $5 for the simplicity of math here. You're going to get $5 a week, and you've got to pay your tithing on that. And you're going to put 10% in tithing and 50% in savings, or 40% in savings, whatever you want to do. And the remainder is your play money. And you can save that to buy you something special, like a new basketball or a new skateboard. Or you can just spend it on the things you see in the store, as long as me or your dad approve it. But that's the only way you're going to get things when we're out shopping, is if you spend your own money. So your money has to be with you, and you have to have enough to buy it, and I have to approve it. The second I did that when my son was little, it was like the smartest thing I'd ever done, because finally he stopped asking for me to buy stuff for him in the store. I didn't have to do that anymore. I didn't have to constantly go, no, you can't have it. No, not today. No, you don't need that. But when I was like, sure, it's your money. Yeah, if you want to spend it. And then all of a sudden, he didn't want to spend his money on a bag of chips or a pack of gum, because he wanted to save it for bigger things. And it just cut down all of that stuff that happened in the store. So anytime you see a pattern in behavior that you don't really love, think about how you could head it off beforehand where it can be a little bit more positive. Another situation that can be really negative is bedtime. And I know a lot of you struggle with just getting your kids in the bed. Oh my goodness, there's some comedians out there that have done such funny, little things about putting kids in the bed at night. There's some, I think that, what's his name? I shouldn't have brought it up because I don't remember his name. Anyway, I've seen a really funny comedy thing on putting kids to bed. We can all relate to that. But the thing about bedtime is that what I don't like about it being so negative is that you just don't want the last words to your children before they close their eyes and go to sleep for it to be you going, I told you to go to sleep and don't make another sound. You don't want that to be the last things your kids are thinking about as they go to sleep. But you're like, well, so what am I supposed to do? If I don't do that, my kids won't go to sleep. So once again, that's a pattern of behavior. And so what could we do? Well, one of the best things I like to do to get kids in the bed is to definitely let your kids help create a special bedtime routine. And they're going to help you. And you're also going to create a visual aid for them to remember their bedtime routine. So maybe you're going to buy just a little whiteboard. And on that whiteboard, you and your child are going to discuss the 5 or 6 things that they're going to accomplish in their bedtime routine. So maybe at 7:30 every night, the timer goes off and you're like, okay, kids, bedtime routine, because bedtime's at 8. So you're going to give them 30 minutes to get their bedtime routine done. And maybe on one child's list, sure, it's going to have brush my teeth, put my dirty clothes in the dirty clothes hamper, put on my pajamas, say my prayers, fill up my water glass, pick out my storybook, pick out 2 stuffed animals to sleep with that night. And that list is hanging on their bedroom door or or on their nightstand or maybe on the bathroom mirror. And they have their own special dry erase marker. And you have taken them to the store to let them pick out their nighttime glass that they only use during the night. So it's special. And so why this works so often it works is because you're not supposed to be sitting there going, have you brushed your teeth? Have you put your dirty clothes away? Have you put your pajamas on? Because that's called micromanaging your kids. And it doesn't help them learn to be successful. It doesn't empower them, and it doesn't help them to feel good about themselves. And it also makes them lazy, makes them have to rely on your instruction to function. That's not what we're trying to teach. We're trying to teach children to be independent of us so that one day they can be independent of us, because that's important. And so what happens is you let your kids go and do their bedtime routine. Sorry, there's a train going by. There's a little extra noise here. And so, you know how you and I feel when we get to check off our checklist each day? It feels like, yes, I did something. I accomplished something. We're trying to create a way for your kids to check off the same list, for your kids to feel good about the fact that they can take care of themselves. So then they come and they're like, Mom, I got my routine done. Come read a book with me. And so they've done all of that. And you go in and they've got their 2 stuffed animals. And so it's been like a fun experience because they got to pick out their stuffed animals. They got to get their water glass. So let them help you come up with their bedtime routine, because when they're the ones that decide, granted, they don't get to decide whether they brush their teeth or not, but when they get to have input in these routines, it helps them feel good about it and it empowers them. By the way, you all, thank you. Let me see. Sorry, let me get my eyes on and I'm going to see who made a comment. Yeah, Holly. Hey, Holly. Thanks for the comment. You all can ask questions along the way. So if you have a question or a comment, feel free and I'll read the question. But it just makes such a big difference when your kids are invested in the solution to these problems. So, okay, I'm going to give you, that might have been my last, it was my last example. Now, this is just a challenge. You can take it if you want it. It would give you some real insight where there's need of improvement. And that is if you just put a piece of paper on your kitchen counter today. Just put it on there, and I want you to make 2 columns. I want you to make a column correction and another column that says encouragement or cheering or teaching, whatever. But I would say correction, encouragement. And then just throughout the next 24 hours, I just want you to do a little mark every time you either corrected or every time you encouraged. Thank you, Michelle Wickline. Thank you. And just kind of see. What I want you to see is after the 24 hours, do you have more cheers than corrections? And if you don't, then parents, there's some room for improvement. It's hard when we're frustrated and when we're tired to always be positive. And I'm not saying that that's a realistic expectation to be positive 100% of the time. But parents, we can be positive 95% of the time. We can. It's a choice. It's a personal choice. And even though sometimes I might be on the inside really angry, I'm going to try to breathe and, honey, would you please explain to me why you just made that decision? And I'm going to talk like that because me talking like that actually helps me calm down. And usually I need to be the first one to calm down when my kids are going crazy. And so that's really important. Hey, Marie, you know what? That's a great question. Marie Nelson, she says, how can this work with teens who won't go to bed? Oh, that's a hard one. So let me give you some ideas on just the things that I would be a little concerned about. So number one, if we know that our house is a safe house, and what I mean by that is if we have teenagers in our home, parents, I think one of the best suggestions I've ever heard is if we have our modem, our internet service on a program where our internet literally shuts down at 10 o'clock at night and doesn't start back up until, say, 8 in the next morning. So there is no chance that anybody can get on the internet during the night when mom and dad are asleep. So that's, and I know that's a different topic, but let me tell you why I'm talking about this with that question, Marie. So number one, when I know that my house is safe from that kind of harm, you know what I'm talking about, the dangers on the internet. And then also my cable. I know that I don't have any channels available inside our home, inside the walls of our home, that could have dangerous things for our kids to stumble upon. So if I knew those 2 things were safe, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be important to me that my kids went to bed, my teenagers went to bed. But I had a mom once come to me, and her child would not go to bed at night. And then her child would not get up in the morning. And it was a battle. And her daughter, when she came to me and talked to me about it, her daughter was, I think, 16. And so she tried lots of things. She took the phone away. She grounded the daughter. She did several things. And for about a year, she said they were at war with each other. Just every night almost, and every morning, there was some kind of really negative interaction. And as she was praying about it, she really got a real clear impression that she had to let that go because it was doing more harm, that their relationship was falling apart at a really critical time in a child's life, that was causing more harm than the fact that she was staying up too late and sleeping in too late. And so she had to make a choice. And that's one of those choices as a parent that's so difficult because when your kids get 14 and older, it does become a little more difficult to parent in the sense that we typically don't just dish out consequences, because if we're having to dish out consequences when our kids are teenagers, there's something else wrong, right? It doesn't mean our kids are always going to make perfect decisions as teenagers, but typically by the time our kids are teenagers, typically, in my opinion, the main correcting we're doing is we're having kind discussions with our kids. So we're going to, tell our kids what our expectations are. Maybe there would be a consequence for our children, of course, breaking our expectations. But at some point, at least in my experience, I've learned that I can only do so much. Like once my kids became teenagers, I would teach them what was expected, try to be an example of the right way to do things, make sure they were aware of the consequences when they didn't do those things. And then I kind of backed up and said, look, you're a teenager. You're going to be an adult in just a couple years. You got to start making these choices for yourself. So I guess to answer your question, I would say, making sure our environment is safe. So if they do go against our wishes and stay up later than we want, we know that our home is safe. And then number 2, you got to decide how far you're willing to fight it. Some parents might say that's being a weak parent, but I've learned when my kids are 10 and under, you better believe it, or 12 and under maybe. Mom's rules are the rules. Mom and dad's rules are what we're going to live by. But when they start becoming teenagers, it gets tricky because to me, the most important thing to me was that my relationship with them was healthy. So I don't know if that helps you, Marie, but that's my 2 cents. All right, you all, I'm going to let you go unless anyone else has a question. Thank you for joining us. And does anyone have any other comment or piece of advice that you could offer the rest of us? Of course, type it in there, and I'd love to share it with everyone. But happy Friday. Me and my husband are going to go exchange some Christmas presents. So that's what I'm off to go do. You guys have a great weekend. Thank you for listening. Bye.